Hi, folks. It's time to talk about the deeper truths of the story of Zacchaeus, the man who climbed up in a tree to see Jesus because he was short. The story starts out actually in identifying what kind of person Zacchaeus was, what his job was, what his vocation was. He was, of course, a tax collector, not just a tax collector, but a chief tax collector, it says. Now, of course, in Judea or Palestine, in the time of Jesus, the tax collectors were agents of the Romans, agents of Roman occupation. They were collecting taxes from the Jews to pass on to the occupying power. And so Zacchaeus was a hated member of the community. You can see a good picture here where they're grudgingly giving Zacchaeus their taxes. And what we knew about tax collectors at the time is they were hated, not just because they represented Roman hegemony, but because there was very little oversight of the tax collectors by the Romans. As long as the Romans got what was owed them, according to the Romans, they didn't really care if the tax collectors were being ethical or were being fair. And so, yes, tax collectors were probably taking an extra cut here and there without any justification. Stealing, of course, from the people of all shapes and sizes. Now, this often makes us think that the tax collectors were someone that the people would throw mud at, throw rocks at. Oh, they're the outsiders, we hate them. And here's a picture of some people objecting to Zacchaeus. And I wonder, would you really throw mud at the local guy who could overpower you with his position and take money from you? I'm guessing probably people hated them in secret, or perhaps like an open secret, but they would not actually mistreat tax collectors. That's my guess, right? I don't know for sure. I haven't done a whole lot of research on that, but what do you think? That seems like that's what the dynamic would be. Now, Jesus, of course, was friendly to tax collectors. Jesus here shows one with a bag of money, which is emblematic of thievery in this book. Jesus is greeting tax collectors. He eats with tax collectors. He eats with prostitutes. He eats with people whom the Pharisees and scribes, like we heard about in the last session, would never want to eat with, would never want to have fellowship with, and would never want to say, we're on equal footing. But Jesus is fine with that. He says he is on footing with sinners because, in fact, he is coming to free sinners and to become the chief of sinners. Zacchaeus finds a crowd that he can't get through because it says he was a man of small stature. We don't often get the Bible describing the physical characteristics of people, but this one is important because he's too small to get in. He's too small to get a good vantage point of what Jesus was looking like or how he was teaching. So he climbs up in a sycamore tree. And when Jesus comes by, it is as if he was planning this. He looks up in the tree and he sees the little guy up there and he says, Zacchaeus, come down here because I have to go to your house today. This was evidently Jesus' plan, to go to the house of the sinner, the house of the thief, the tax collector, and sit down with him and have a conversation. That seems to have made a great effect on Zacchaeus. We don't hear what Jesus tells Zacchaeus at that lunch. All we hear is what Zacchaeus tells Jesus, where he says, Lord, now I give half of my property to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone, I will pay it back 4 times. And of course, Jesus does speak after that, and he says, today salvation has come to this house. For the Son of Man was sent to seek out and save the lost. And so it's a great story for us to see. And finally, the last page, Zacchaeus is right here. He's giving back whatever money he stole to the people. It's a good story for kids because they can follow where the money was. They can follow that, yes, he broke the 7th commandment, the 7th, you shall not steal. And now, because of repentance, he is restoring fourfold. He's bearing fruit in keeping with repentance. He's giving the money back. This is not just a story about being short or Jesus comes for even short people. It's just a story about repentance. It's a story about Jesus identifying himself with the most hated of tax collectors. And because of that identification, the most hated of sinners can begin to conceive of the love of Christ. Here's a picture, which I guess I didn't use before. It's of the people who reacted to Jesus going into the house of Zacchaeus. They're pointing at Jesus. They're angry that he is not going to the ones that had a great reputation. He's going to the ones that everybody could acknowledge was probably engaged in a life of corruption. without end. That's the one Jesus goes to. And of course, as one pastor preached in a sermon, I remember, he takes the target that was on Zacchaeus' back and puts it on his own back. That's a wonderful thing for us to see. That's what Jesus does. He takes the sin of the world and he says, I'm going to go into your house and I'm going to eat with you. Boom. And you're going to eat with me. Jesus puts the sin on himself. And when he goes to the cross, he's putting to death the sins of the world and bringing salvation to the house of people like you and me, people like Zacchaeus. For he came to seek out and save the lost. That's about all for today. Hope you have a good Ash Wednesday. I would invite you to attend worship. We'll probably have a second video about that in just a second. God's blessing.